Hi, welcome to Sweet Sensations. My name is Lynn Ross, and today we're making with two things that go perfectly together, maple and walnuts. We're going to make tarts and blondies with a maple cream sauce. For our maple walnut tarts, we need 12 tart shells, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1/4 cup of flour, 1 egg, 1/4 cup of melted butter, 1 teaspoon of maple extract, 1/2 cup of walnuts, and 1/4 cup of maple syrup. We'll make a maple icing for the tarts with 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 cup of icing sugar, 1 teaspoon of maple extract, and about a tablespoon of cream. The maple walnut blondies will be 1/2 cup of butter, 1 cup of brown sugar, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of maple extract, cup of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 3/4 cup of butterscotch chips, and 1/2 cup of walnuts. And our maple cream sauce will be 1 tablespoon of butter, 2 ounces of cream cheese, 1/4 cup of icing sugar, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, a teaspoon of vanilla, and a tablespoon of cream. So we're going to start with our tarts, and we'll start with the filling for the tarts. So we're going with 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And we're using brown sugar in both of these treats today because the sweet caramely flavor of brown sugar goes perfectly with maple. 1/4 cup of flour. Let's toss those together a little bit. I have 1/4 cup of butter that I melted earlier just so it would have a chance to cool down. Have a teaspoon of maple extract, and I usually just measure these extracts in the cap, but this is a different brand. The cap is a little smaller, so I'll measure up my 1 teaspoon. And if you don't have maple extract, excuse me, you could just use vanilla. But when I'm making maple desserts, I like to get as much maple flavor in there as I can. And 1 egg. I'm just going to beat that up a little bit before I add it in there. So all the walnuts for these recipes, I toasted them up just in a dry pan, toasted them lightly. So you want to do that ahead of time too, so that the walnuts can cool down too. So we want 1/2 cup of walnuts. So if you toast them ahead of time, you can just put them in a container and just store them in the fridge. So we're just going to beat this together. And that's all there is to the filling. It's a very simple recipe to make. So if I'm making butter tarts, I like to make a homemade, kind of a sweet pastry, and I like to make homemade pie crust for coconut tarts and things like that. But for this recipe, these pre-made tart shells work perfectly. I've never used the pre-made actual pie shells, but these tart shells are really nice, and using them lets you make these tarts in no time. So you just take them out of the freezer about 10-15 minutes before you want to use them, because they're all frozen in a block when you first take them out, so that gives them time to thaw enough that you can get them apart. Just lay them out on a tray. Now we're going to take about 1/4 cup of maple syrup. And we're going to take about a teaspoonful and just pour it into the bottom of each little tart shell. So the original recipe for these calls for jam. The recipe said raspberry jam. You take a teaspoon of jam and spread it out to the bottom of each tart. So the first time I made them, I tried that. I like to put usually a little bit of jam in the bottom of my coconut tarts. And they were good that way, but right away I was thinking they'd be better with more maple flavor. And it's just to put a little bit of sweetness at the bottom, so I thought a better way to do that would be with the maple syrup than the jam. So I tried that and I liked it much better, but if you want to use the jam, they're nice with the jam too. Okay, I'm just going to close up my maple syrup because I don't want to spill that. I just have to bring back the filling that we whipped up. Then you take a little spoonful. You're just going to fill up each tart. Just divide it as best as you can. You don't have to worry about spreading it out too much, because once it hits the heat of the oven, it's just going to spread itself out. I have to watch. I'm always tempted to fill them up too much and then don't have enough at the end. So if you're looking for more ways to use your maple syrup, if you're a maple lover, you can substitute it for any other liquid sweetener like molasses, corn syrup, honey. So in recipes, you can just substitute that at an equal amount, cup for cup. Put a nice maple flavor on things. You can even use it in place of white or brown sugar in recipes, but not in equal amount. For every cup of white or brown sugar that you're replacing, you use about 2/3 cup of maple syrup. And because it's more liquid, then you cut back on the whatever liquid you're using in your recipe, milk or water, whatever, by about 1/4 cup. But just some ideas for using more maple syrup in your baking, if that's something you're interested in doing. These pre-made tart shells, they're great for all kinds of recipes for different sweet tarts, and they're even good for savory recipes, like they make perfect little mini quiches, anything like that. Anything at all you'd like to fill them with. I'm just going to get this last little bit out. You don't want to waste any. So we're going to put these in the oven at 375 for about 22 minutes probably. So I'm going to put these in. Switch off bowls, because once they're baked and cooled, we're going to top them with a maple frosting for more maple flavor. So in this bowl I have 2 tablespoons of room temperature butter. I'm going with the maple extract again, another teaspoonful. About a tablespoon of cream. So I'm just using, it's the light coffee cream that I use for my coffee, but whatever you have, whipping cream or regular coffee cream or even milk, whatever you have in the fridge will work. And a cup of icing sugar. All we have to do is beat this together. And that's a very simple frosting for our very simple tarts. So I'll do a little cleanup here. When we come back, we'll get started on the blondies. Welcome back. We'll frost those tarts later. Right now we're going to get started on our blondies. So for that I have a half cup of browned butter. So I did this ahead of time to let it cool down a bit, but for the browned butter, you're just going to melt your butter and then you let it heat for a while. It will all get all foamy on the top, and then when that foam kind of settles down, you'll see that it changes color underneath, and you'll know when it's ready. It'll smell delicious and have kind of a toasted nutty aroma, and it just adds a lot more flavor to things. So we're using that for our blondies, and going with brown sugar again, which goes with maple and is traditional in blondies. So we want a cup of brown sugar. And blondies are typically flavored with vanilla, so we're going with a teaspoon of vanilla. But because we're making maple versions of things today, I'm also going to put in a teaspoon of maple extract. And 1 egg. We're just going to whisk that together. It's just like brownies, we don't want to beat too much air into this. So a whisk will be fine just to beat up that egg. Mix everything together there. So around here we probably think of something like rhubarb or fiddleheads as the first harvests of the year, but I suppose actually it's probably maple syrup, since the trees are tapped in late winter, early spring. So once that's mixed, I'm going to get rid of this whisk. Trade that off for a wooden spoon to mix in our dry ingredients, which are just a cup of flour, half teaspoon of baking powder, quarter teaspoon of salt, so we'll start mixing that. So we tend to think of maple syrup, I think maple as kind of a warm fall flavor, but when you think about it, we really should be celebrating maple in the springtime. And the grocery stores are good at that. The store bakeries have a lot of maple desserts on the go right now, so we'll do the same. I'm gonna grab my, when that's almost mixed, we're gonna add our add-ins. 3/4 cup of butterscotch chips. And another half cup of our toasted walnuts. So this recipe is actually for white chocolate maple blondies, but the first time I made them I got this far before I noticed that I had no white chocolate chips. I had everything but semi-sweet, dark chocolate, milk chocolate, minis, peanut butter, butterscotch, everything else you could think of, but no white. So I thought butterscotch would be the best bet, because blondies are sometimes called butterscotch brownies. So I thought the butterscotch chips would work the best in there, and I really liked them in there, so I never did end up trying the white chocolate. I like the butterscotch, but I'm sure they'd be delicious with white chocolate too. Or even if that's all you had, regular chocolate chips, because chocolate and butterscotch goes together. So I think any of those would work really. So I have baking these in an 8x8 pan. I just have mine lined with parchment just to make it easier to lift them out and cut them when they're done. So we just have to spread this out. So like I said, blondies they're very similar to a brownie, similar in texture, and they're just a sweet dessert bar, and they're rich and buttery, very easy to make. And just like brownies, you can bake them plain or put in lots of add-ins like we did today. Our butterscotch chips and walnuts. So these are going to bake at 350. And this is something you don't want to overbake, so about 20, somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes, probably somewhere right in the middle. Because if you overbake them, you're going to have really crispy edges that you don't want. And even if they don't look completely done when you take them out, they'll continue to firm up and cook a little bit more after you take them out. So just lay that there because the tarts are in there and baking at a different temperature. So we'll put them in a little later. And we'll get started on our maple cream sauce to go with these blondies. So I have a tablespoon of butter, nice soft butter, and 2 ounces of softened cream cheese. So 2 ounces, it's an 8-ounce block, so just divide it up into 8 equal pieces and put 2 in the bowl here. We need just a 1/4 cup of icing sugar. Because these ingredients, it's similar to just an icing that we're making, but we're making it in a more liquid form. So instead of spreading it on the blondies, we can use it as a sauce. I'm going with, we're using maple syrup, so I'm going to flavor this with vanilla. We'll use the maple syrup for our maple flavor this time. We want 2 tablespoons, so to get that, it's easier just to measure your 1/4 cup halfway full. And I have my coffee cream here again. I'm going to beat this in first. Just want to beat that until it's smooth, and the cream is just to get it to the right consistency for pouring over, so I don't think I'm going to need the tablespoon. So you can mix that up first and then see how much you think you need. So I think just that little drop will be plenty. If you need more when you start to pour, you can just add a little bit more then. So I'm going to clean up one more time. When we come back, we'll frost the tarts and turn the blondies into a dessert. Welcome back. So usually I like to swirl my icing on with a decorator bag, but for these, since we're going simple with these, I like to just spread some on the top with the spoon. And you don't have to make this icing, but it just adds another layer of maple flavor and a little bit more sweetness. Butter tarts are made with raisins and generally corn syrup, although you can make a version with maple syrup and walnuts or pecans, but these are a little different from butter tarts. They don't have the same kind of runny consistency, and the good thing about that is they firm up enough that we can put this maple frosting on the top. And then I like to put a little maple, a little walnut on the top, and that is all there is to them. So easy to make, and with these tart shells you don't even have any muffin tins or anything to wash when you're finished. Now the blondies, delicious just as is, but if you want to turn them into a decadent dessert, we can make kind of a blondie version of a brownie sundae. So you just take one, put it on the plate. Then I have some ice cream. It looks like vanilla, and you could definitely use vanilla, but in keeping with our theme today, it's actually maple walnut. So you just put a scoop on there. Just going to grab those tarts. Turn the oven down for our blondies to go in. So put your ice cream on there, and then this becomes your little sundae sauce, the maple cream sauce. Pour it on. And if you didn't want to make the maple sauce, you can never go wrong with just a caramel sauce, or keep it really simple and just use a little drizzle of more pure maple syrup. And you could warm the blondie and the sauce if you like. I don't like to, because I don't like my ice cream melted. I like to keep it hard as long as possible, so I like it like that. But if you want to warm both, one or both up, just stick it in the microwave for a minute. So just to review what we used for our maple walnut treats today. We made maple walnut tarts. We filled 12 tart shells with 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1/4 cup of flour, 1 egg, 1/4 cup of melted butter, 1 teaspoon of maple extract, 1/2 cup of walnuts, and 1/4 cup of maple syrup. We topped them with the maple icing made with 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 cup of icing sugar, 1 teaspoon of maple extract, and a tablespoon of cream. The maple walnut blondies were 1/2 cup of browned butter, 1 cup of brown sugar, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of maple extract, 1 cup of flour, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 3/4 cup of butterscotch chips, and 1/2 cup of walnuts. And our maple cream sauce was a tablespoon of butter, 2 ounces of cream cheese, 1/4 cup of icing sugar, 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, a teaspoon of vanilla, and a tablespoon more or less of cream. So don't save your walnuts to top your banana splits and your maple syrup to top your pancakes. The bitterness of walnuts is just perfectly complemented by the sweetness of maple syrup. So enjoy them together in treats like these, and be sure to come back next time for Sweet Sensations.